We all know how Kamen Rider Geats is played with a theme of desire, and whether or not selfishly fighting for them alone makes you noble. The show has made excellent use of multiple characters contributing to this narrative by developing different characters with contrasting ideals. However, this episode finally puts the remaining riders with the strongest personal desires up against each other to conclude the first major arc of the series. Greetings and bienvenue, this is Didge reporting, and we're concluding the first arc of Kamen Rider Geats with a review of Episode 9. Leading up to this ep, we knew that Keiwa was not going to be there to balance everyone out, so this time the other characters are left to fend for themselves and play off with each other without using Keiwa as a straight man. So the stakes are still high, and we continue right off from Episode 8. Despite the can being kicked out of the area, the last boss is still alive, and the Jama area expands to allow it to swallow the whole can. In response, the Game Master prepares some eggs containing items that can help the riders against the boss, but need to be nurtured in order to hatch and give them the right item. The challenge continues and the riders must fight while their eggs are still being protected. Nago tries to keep the thing cradled to her, but Buffa thinks it's best to plonk the damn thing on the ground and let it raise itself. Geats tries to pamper the damn egg, and as always, the dude's ego is infectious and tries to act like this thing's his own child. During the fight, he manages to locate the swallowed can in the monster's chest, and manages to get the boost buckle from one of the secret missions. They end up heading back to the lounge after the monster flees again, and Nago gets the armed propeller buckle, while Buffa starts hitting the damn egg against the table, much to Girori's distress, and getting the armed drill buckle. Geats is still unsuccessful in hatching it, and tries to play it off as it needing beauty sleep, but still has the gall to tell the other two to give up so they can return to being regular citizens. Buffa gets pissed at him, telling Geats that he'll win no matter what, with Geats responding that recklessness and courage are two different things. Surprisingly, Nago also makes a show of courage by not backing down either, and later puts on a livestream to get her emotions out to her viewers about it potentially being her last livestream. Buffa self-reflects on what he sees as his friend Toru, assuring to the illusion that he won't forget him, and he will get his revenge. Geats trains on the other hand, remembering his mother, and still has to wait for the egg to hatch. The sun rises for the next day, and the Jamato strike. Buffa and Nago stand ready to fight them and charge them head-on with their new buckles. However, despite their best efforts, they get overpowered and are crushed under the rubble. The odds look stacked against them, and the Jamato are about to finish them off until Geats rides in with the boost striker and tells them yet again to fuck off and let his egg hatch. Buffa refuses to go down, saying that zombies get stronger through death, and nearly tempts fate by deciding to attack the monster head-on, despite his injuries. He even gets back one at Ace for his earlier comment on courage and recklessness, saying that he'll fight no matter what it takes. Geats gets inspired by this and uses his egg to block the monster's sword, telling the thing to wake up, and it hatches, revealing the new toy. I mean, the monster buckle. And within seconds of getting it, he finishes the thing with just one finishing attack. With one punch. Man. The monster goes down, and in the aftermath we see Punkjack detransform, and see that the dude wasn't mute and was watching the whole thing. Geats tells Buffa that he learned a lot from his tenacity and assures him that he'll win if he still keeps going. He even tells Nago that despite her loss, she should never forget her ideals. The other two riders retire, and the new world gets created. Sumerid shows disgust at the wish being revealed, but the Game Master decides to continue. He then reveals himself, to the surprise of absolutely no one, to be Girori. They really thought they were doing a twist here, weren't they? Looking at the basic episode plot rundown, it wasn't bad, but it was very underwhelming for a finale. It felt like the writers spent a lot more of the hype on Keiwa's arc, and it shows. When I watched it for the first time, it kind of bothered me a lot, and I think it has to do a lot with the lack of unique character interactions that haven't already been done in previous episodes. There were some lovely moments of banter between Michinaga and Neon when hatching the egg and when they're about to fight the Jamato in the final scene, but otherwise it feels somewhat hollow, since Keiwa isn't there as a straight man to play off them, so there's no source of conflict from a character standpoint to contrast them. Ace still antagonizes him, but that's something he's always done, and this isn't the first time he has shown compassion, so it falls a little flat in my eyes. They all still have some character moments, like when Michinaga talks to the imagined version of Toru in his head. Even he can't help but imagine Toru as someone who looks at his desire as something that's causing him harm. So it's kind of like he's jabbing at his own weird desires and how contradictory his ideas are. Neon's strain with the livestream was also quite tragic, since she can't be explicit about the situation. Yet there's still a sadness in the fact that Neon's final moments were spent saying bye to her fans, who don't even know her as a person, over her own family. Geats, in contrast, still vaguely remembers his mother during training, and for the first time we really get to see him scared that he might lose if the egg doesn't hatch, which is a sign of weakness that I'm glad they're finally showing Geats having, because, we've had several episodes of him being an absolute ass kicker. so it's nice to have those moments of him being a bit more human. Thankfully, these moments prevent the episodes from feeling like it was dragging, but it still doesn't excuse some of the writing problems that also existed from the previous episodes. I'm nitpicking, but these mistakes still annoy me whenever I think about them. Geats never fought the monster before, right? It was around since before he joined, so it's so weird that he knew how to defeat him in episode 8 with the ninja buckle. However, I can put that down to the fact that he says that the buckle is designed to defeat that specific monster, so maybe he just knows what the buckle itself does, even if he doesn't know the monster's whole game. He does act surprised, however, when the can needed to be kicked out of the area, and again when the JAMA area expanded. The first scenario only happened because Suri never mentioned that very crucial detail, but now there's also a scenario failure, since there's nothing to really explain why this monster decided not to go down, after they did it right this time, and if anything, it reduces Keiwa's impact in the previous episode. I know this is an issue that you can say does exist mainly for the previous episodes, but this episode only adds an extra layer of problems onto those. Plus, his whole tenacity lesson with Buffa doesn't really explain why he needed to use the egg as a shock absorber. There was really nothing that explained how those two elements correlated. How does him using the egg to stop the monster's sword suddenly mean that thing's gonna wake up? And if anything, this also then brings into question, how does Geats know how to beat this thing? Does he know how to do it or not? The way the episodes play out before, it's like he always knows how to play these games, but for some reason is unaware of things like the rules changing or these specific stipulations when the monsters do something that you're not aware of. This is the kind of stuff that becomes a bit more apparent in a series with a constantly flowing narrative but no continuity director, which is a staple for all Rider shows sadly. I have praised the writing of the show so far, and I think this episode is nowhere close to as bad as the kind of bad that would make me hate the series as a whole. It's kind of telling that I'd still consider it to be better than a lot of the best episodes of other seasons. Ghost. Revice. I just think that the show is going to suffer later if it has such glaring flaws so early on, especially in a season with such good writing. And I don't want it to lose that momentum since this episode is still dealing with problems that were introduced in the previous episodes and doesn't have as much to save it as those episodes did. I'm being harsh because I love the show and I want it to be good. Even if I'm some random nobody with no say in the production, especially since I'm watching it through less than legal methods. But I've rambled on for a long time, and if it wasn't already obvious, you now know why this episode was a single review instead of a combined one. For me, I just want the show to get better. So, let's examine the fight so I don't sit here and rant all day. The fights in this episode feel like they wanted to play a lot with the tension in certain scenes. The fight showing Buffa and Nago fighting the Jamato was a great example, along with the egg protecting fight. The latter example was tense for more comical reasons, since you have characters trying their best not to break something, all while trying to worry about saving people from the monster. Buffa's approach, I swear, was way funnier than I thought. Seeing him dish out some carnage while letting the egg raise itself, and Nago panicking to keep the thing away from the Jamato, was great. It was directed in a way it felt like they really owned the ridiculous concept and kept it in character for everyone. But the fight against the final boss and his army was something special. Seeing how Buffa and Nago use their new buckles to the best of their abilities was a treat, since we get to see them employed in ways that contrast or assist with their pre-established fighting styles. Buffa is more aggressive than usual now that he has a more up-close weapon with no range options like the zombie slasher, and Nago is flying all over the place and using the propeller blade as a distancing tool and a beat stick. She has to focus more on her ability to evade and push away enemies, rather than if she used the claw or hammer buckle, which would force her to get way too close, leading to a disadvantage against this many foes. Geats does get a couple of fights that are a bit briefer though. He mainly has the moment with the monster's raise buckle debut, and I think the form is fine. Geats' colors don't clash with it, but I think the shade of blue they picked for Monster was a bit too bright. A slightly darker shade could have tied it up real nice, especially if they're going with the sleepy, soft time vibes. To be honest, I do think that the one punch is kinda anticlimactic, and the buckle will never come as close to being as flashy as in this ep, so it'll probably end up becoming yet another generic side upgrade. Oh well, at least it'll give some variety to the power-ups. But generally, I think Geats had some pretty nice scenes, especially with the egg, but it just felt about the same as what was already there from previous episodes. In this case, I felt like he played it a bit more safe. I don't really feel the need to mention effects though. Beyond a few wonky scenes like Nago flying and the monster's attacks, I decided not to talk much about them because unlike episode 8 where they relied a lot on the CGI, the fights weren't as long and it wasn't as fast paced. So I guess they didn't really need to bother about making things as flashy as they needed to in the previous episode, since the major fight was over in a few seconds with Geats' whole One Punch Man reference. Overall, this episode is okay, but it's an underwhelming finale to the very first arc of the series. It does have some solid character moments sprinkled in, but still nothing much to carry it on in its own rights in the fights or story, especially since it continues the faults of the previous episodes. We'll have to see if the writing goes back on course, but that'll have to wait till when we get to the next arc. And prep yourselves, people, because this is gonna be a doozy, since I'm gonna look at episodes 10 to 12 all at once. I'll try to get it out soon, though, but until we get to that point, see you later, folks. This is Didge signing off. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and pressing the bell for notifications. I'm really looking forward to growing this channel and would love some feedback. Hopefully you enjoyed what you've seen. So long.